So began, in American political life, the new day, the day of the individual against the system. The day in which individualism was made the great watchword of American life. The happiest of economic conditions made that day long and splendid. On the western frontier, land was substantially free. No one, who did not shirk the task of earning a living, was entirely without opportunity to do so. Depressions could, and did, come and go. But they could not alter the fundamental fact. That most of the people lived partly by selling their labor and partly by extracting their livelihood from the soil. So that starvation and dislocation were practically impossible. At the very worst there was always the possibility of climbing into a covered wagon. And moving west where the untilled prairies afforded a haven for men to whom the East did not provide a place. So great were our natural resources that we could offer this relief not only to our own people, but to the distressed of all the world. We could invite immigration from Europe. And welcome it with open arms. Traditionally, when a depression came, a new section of land was opened in the West. And even our temporary misfortune served our manifest destiny. It was the middle of the 19th century that a new force was released and a new dream created. The force was what is called the Industrial Revolution. The advance of steam and machinery and the rise of the forerunners of the modern industrial plant. The dream was the dream of an economic machine, able to raise the standard of living for everyone. To bring luxury within the reach of the humblest. To annihilate distance by steam power and later by electricity, and to release everyone from the drudgery of the heaviest manual toil. It was to be expected that this would necessarily affect government. Heretofore, government had merely been called upon to produce conditions. Within which people could live happily, labor peacefully, and rest secure. Now it was called upon to aid in the consummation of this new dream. There was, however, a shadow over the dream. To be made real, it required use of the talents of men of tremendous will, and tremendous ambition. Since by no other force could the problems of financing and engineering and new developments be brought to a consummation. So manifest were the advantages of the machine age, however, that the United States fearlessly cheerfully, and, I think, rightly, accepted the bitter with the sweet. It was thought that no price was too high to pay for the advantages which we could draw from a finished industrial system. The history of the last half-century is accordingly in large measure a history of a group of financial titans. Whose methods were not scrutinized with too much care. And who were honored in proportion as they produced the results, irrespective of the means they used. The financiers who pushed the railroads to the Pacific were always ruthless. We have them today. It has been estimated that the American investor paid for the American railway system more than three times over in the process. But despite that fact, the net advantage was to the United States. As long as we had free land. As long as population was growing by leaps and bounds. As long as our industrial plants were insufficient to supply our needs, society chose to give the ambitious man free play and unlimited reward, provided only that he produced the economic plan so much desired. During this period of expansion, there was equal opportunity for all and the business. Of government was not to interfere but to assist in the development of industry. This was done at the request of businessmen themselves. The tariff was originally imposed for the purpose of fostering our infant industry. A phrase I think the older among you will remember as a political issue not so long ago. The railroads were subsidized, sometimes by grants of money. Oftener by grants of land. Some of the most valuable oil lands in the United States were granted to assist the financing. Of the railroad which pushed through the Southwest, a nascent merchant marine was assisted by grants of money. Or by mail subsidies, so that our steam shipping might ply the 7 seas. Some of my friends tell me that they do not want the government in business. With this I agree. But I wonder whether they realize the implications of the past. For while it has been American doctrine that the government must not go into business in competition with private enterprises. Still it has been traditional, particularly in Republican administrations, for business. Urgently to ask the government to put at private disposal all kinds of government assistance. The same man who tells you that he does not want to see the government interfere in business, and he means it. And has plenty of good reasons for saying so, is the first. To go to Washington and ask the government for a prohibitory tariff on his product. When things get just bad enough as they did 2 years ago, he will go with equal speed to the United States government and ask for a loan. And the Reconstruction Finance Corporation is the outcome of it. Each group has sought protection from the government for its own special interest. Without realizing that the function of government must be to favor no small group at the expense of. Its duty to protect the rights of personal freedom and of private property of all its citizens. In retrospect, we can now see that the turn of the tide came with the turn of the century. We were reaching our last frontier. There was no more free land, and our industrial combinations had become great uncontrolled and irresponsible units of power within the state. Clear-sighted men saw with fear the danger that opportunity would no longer be equal. That the growing corporation like the feudal baron of old, might threaten the economic freedom of individuals. To earn a living. In that hour, our antitrust laws were born. The cry was raised against the great corporations. Theodore Roosevelt, the first great Republican progressive, fought a presidential campaign on the issue of trust busting and talked freely about malefactors of great wealth. If the government had a policy, it was rather to turn the clock back. to destroy the large combinations and to return to the time when every man owned his individual small business. This was impossible. Theodore Roosevelt, abandoning the idea of trust busting. Was forced to work out a difference between good trusts and bad trusts. The Supreme Court set forth the famous rule of reason by which it seems to have meant that a concentration of industrial power was permissible if the method by which it got its power and the use it made of that power was reasonable. Woodrow Wilson, elected in 1912, saw the situation more clearly. Where Jefferson had feared the encroachment of political power on the lives of individuals, Wilson knew that the new power was financial. He say, in the highly centralized economic system, the depot of the 20th century. On whom great masses of individuals relied for their safety and their livelihood. And whose irresponsibility and greed, if it were not controlled, would reduce them to starvation and penury. The concentration of financial power had not proceeded so far. In 1912 as it has today. But it had grown far enough for Mr. Wilson to realize fully its implications. It is interesting, now, to read his speeches. What is called radical today, and I have reason to know whereof I speak, is mild compared to the campaign of Mr. Wilson. No man can deny, he said, that the lines of endeavor have more and more narrowed and stiffened. No man who knows anything about the development of industry in this country can have failed. to observe that the larger kinds of credit are more and more difficult to obtain unless you obtain them upon terms of uniting your efforts with those who already control the industry of the country. And nobody can fail to observe that every man who tries to set himself up in competition with any process of manufacture which has taken place under the control of large combinations of capital will presently find himself either squeezed out or obliged to sell and allow himself to be absorbed. Had there been no World War, had Mr. Wilson been able to devote 8 years to domestic instead of to international, affairs, we might have had a wholly different situation at the present time. However, the then distant roar of European cannon, growing ever louder, forced him to abandon the study of this issue. The problem he saw so clearly is left with us as a legacy. And no one of us on either side of the political controversy can deny that it is a matter of grave concern to the government. A glance at the situation today only too clearly indicates that equality of opportunity as we have known it no longer exists. Our industrial plant is built. The problem just now is whether under existing conditions it is not overbuilt. Our last frontier has long since been reached, and there is practically no more free land. More than half of our people do not live on the farms or on lands and cannot derive a living by cultivating their own property. There is no safety valve in the from of a western prairie to which those thrown out of work by the Eastern economic machines can go for a new start. We are not able to invite the immigration from Europe to share our endless plenty. We are now providing a drab living for our own people.